I don't always understand it. It's a hard place to be to die
Yeah.
to self. And so we don't say this as if it's just easy territory. We're saying, hey, it still needs to be done, but it's not easy. It's not easy, and neither is following Christ, period. So we do want to encourage people to die to self, but we're just saying it is a process.
And let me just make sure I say, like, the little ways, it is so easy to do when it comes to little stuff. Like, I cannot eat pork all day. I didn't grow up doing it, so it's easy for me to give that up, right? It's easy for me not to do. It's easy for me not to go out on Friday night.
Yeah.
I've never done it, so it's easy for me to die to self in that way. It's when it comes to the hard stuff that it's really difficult to do.
I think that like you said, like there's the easy ones and there's the hard ones. I think I've come to realize the hard ones is when I have to deal with other people. Those are the very hard ones for me, and it's just something that eats up inside me where I feel like I have to say something, I have to do something, and God is telling me like that is not how I operate. You get what I'm saying? This is not what I. One thing about it, we was talking about Jesus and how he was always focused. He was always able to see, hey, what this person can be. You see the potential in someone. We throw all that out the door when we get upset. We throw all that out the door when we're being attacked. And one thing about it is that's one of my struggles is like when I'm dealing with people, it's just not the easiest thing for me to listen to God and say, hey, take care of this, handle this, because I'm over here being attacked. You know what I'm saying? I'm being abused, and I'm like, I can't take that. So I'm like, God, work this out for me. But one thing about it, we have to be prepared. And I know everyone's not able to be prepared before a situation, but that's when, my mom used to tell me, when you get up, pray. Surrender yourself in the morning. You get what I'm saying? A lot of us don't like to do it until that situation hit us. And, I've seen a situation where a guy got into it. He had already got the fine, and then he tried to hand it over to Christ. You get what I'm saying? The
While he
damage
on the ground.
the damage was done. And then he wanted to say, hey, let's talk about this. It's over. You know what I'm saying? And like we have to surrender early in the morning because we don't know what's gonna happen later on that day.
And I think what we said earlier was that, surrendering to Christ, like we said, isn't easy, but it has benefits for you. And that's the main thing, that there's some things that we really don't know. And we really have to get to the point where we trust the fact that God knows us better than we know ourselves. And stop relying on the things that make us comfortable, relying on the things that kind of in many ways pacifies us and keeps us in the state of kind of like that comfort zone. And Christ is like, yo, I want you to be a whole and complete three-dimensional person. I need you to step out on faith and die to self daily. And yeah, it doesn't feel good, but it will be rewarding in the end to know that, man, I have made a change. I remember I was talking to a friend not too many days ago, and they were like, man, you really changed. And I was thinking a couple of days before, I was like, Lord, have I been converted? Lord, help me. You know what I'm saying? I'd be like, God, have I really changed? And then to see somebody else look at you and say, I really see the change in you. It's like, man, God, you are doing a work. I just don't always see it. You are changing me in ways. I just don't always recognize it. And I have to get to the point, and we all have to get to the point where we trust God to really move us in different directions, no matter how it feels. That's the hard part about it. Anybody else got anything to say about dying to self?
It's so weird. Like, whenever I find myself and I give control to God, I somehow, even though I've given up my control, stay in control. But when I maintain the control for myself, then I'm never happy with what I do. Like, speaking specifically, like dealing with people. Like, whenever I prepare myself, I give it to God. I'm like, all right, God, how do you want me to handle this situation? I'm always more in control when I'm in that situation versus if I don't ask for help in the situation before, I find myself singing all kinds of crazy stuff and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that ultimately just doesn't work. It ultimately just doesn't work. So it's like, I know that his way is just 10 times more sufficient. I know that when I give up control to God, I stay in control. It's just still a struggle.
That's deep.
That was
that's deep, because I mean, when you said that, I immediately connected to my own experiences, and that really does That's how it is. Like, you give up control to God, but in many ways, he just stands beside you and helps you do things. So you're not out of control. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He just is there to help you manage things. And, you know, with him being there, it's a whole different situation. Yeah. So let's let's move on to the next subject. Sorry about that, everybody. All right, number 3. Now, as we got into the next question, we began to talk about things that were from Wednesday's lesson that was talking about the call to ministry and how different people were called and how God has called people. And then the question came up, well, is everyone called to ministry? That's a big idea. So give me some of your feedback. Is everyone called to ministry?
Yeah, everyone is called to ministry. Our life is a ministry. You know, once we give our lives to Christ, then we become a servant of God. And so everything that you do, and once that, it's just like you're getting married. Everybody know you're married now, so you have a responsibility. So when you see someone in the street, I'm like, you married? What you doing? You're married. So we have that same responsibility to Christ. People are now going to watch our lives and see who God is. So we have that responsibility. And when you are conscious towards God, when you have a consciousness towards God, then you automatically feel this obligation to be his servant. It's not an obligation, it's really a joy of being his servant. So yeah, everybody is, we all become ministers. But it's not really, you know, we don't hear it in the church. We just see the minister as the minister. The minister only has the ministry in the church because it's not really enforced in the church, and we're not really encouraged in the church. We just preach the word to him, but we not really have the understanding of our responsibility as carriers of the word of God.
Okay, I think, you know, that was a touchdown. Like, you know, T hit that dead on the nail. A lot of people, we're in a position now where we have to be ministers. You get what I'm saying? We have to be out there on the front lines. And a lot of people feel like, you know, I was listening last night to someone, and he was like, a lot of people feel like we have to fill in a slot in order to be a minister. You get what I'm saying? In order to be in the ministry. We feel like we have to be AYS leader, or we have to be a community service leader or something like that. Ministry is much more than that. It's much broader than that. We got to get out of the lines of I have to be in a position in order to be of service. And that's something that you hit on the nail. It's like, it's being of service. It's spreading the gospel. And in whatever way God puts you in to spread that gospel. And it's not going to always be in a leadership role. And so we have to understand, like, it's more than just, you know, being in the slide. It's more than just being out here in the, it's God has called you to do more than just be a congregation. You get what I'm saying? To just sit out there and do. He's called you to do much more, and to be a witness to your family, to be a witness on your job and in your community. So that's ministry. That's what we're all called to do.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So this week there was a situation at work where someone came in, and I helped them. So we weren't going to be able to take them into the shelter, but I was able to still help them get to where they needed to be. And so some coworkers after that, they were just saying, you know, you're really operating in your calling. Like, you're doing what God has called you to do, and it shows in everything that you do. And I appreciated that compliment, but it also made me kind of introspective as well, because when I was younger and I was being a literature evangelist with your dad, somebody asked me what I wanted to do, and I was telling them, you know, I want to be a psychologist, I want to be a counselor, this is what I want to do. And they were like, oh no, Christians should not do that. People of God should not do that. Working with the mind is God's place, and we should not be playing God by, you know, working with the mind and being in that kind of thing. That's hypnotism. That's not of God. That's of the devil. And I'm so glad I didn't listen, right? Because I'm operating, and I know it. I know it in my soul that what I'm doing is what I was called to do. It is my area of ministry that I get to do every single day. I get to show people Christ through what I do. And so I'm so glad that I didn't listen. But that's just an example of how we're all called to ministry, and whatever it is that you do is a ministry. I mean, think about Mr. Pride right now. This is a ministry that he's able to do this for us. I mean, we never could have imagined that COVID would just like destroy our entire way of life. But if we didn't have someone like if we didn't have Mr. Pride, not even someone like him, then this would not be happening right now. And so what he does is a ministry. What Cody has been able to do is a ministry. What you do is a ministry. Being a supervisor at your job is a ministry. Like, someone else could have gotten that position, but you got it because of who you are. You're operating your calling. And so whatever it is that you do is a ministry. You know, no matter what you do, just the smallest things are ministry, and we're all called to it.
That's a good point.
I mean, I can agree. I mean, and that just goes to show us that ministry is not about preaching, it's not about teaching, it's not just about going knocking on somebody's door. And if you can get that out of your mind, you're one step closer to really engaging in whatever your calling truly is. And, you know, and I think sometimes if we look too far at somebody preaching or somebody who's up in front of everybody, it makes us feel like, oh man, my gift isn't the same. Because sometimes your gift doesn't bring volume. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't always bring a large amount of people before the Lord. But it doesn't really matter. As long as you operate and plant that seed and do whatever you're supposed to do, be faithful to where God has planted you, then, hey, somewhere down the line, that person may get it from someone else. But the main thing is that if we were Christians to be focused on ministry, it doesn't matter if you're working in McDonald's. You know, if you were to be, I mean, I was working at Crystals. I can't even say I was a good Christian. I just knew what I knew, and I wasn't going to allow nobody to talk me out of it. And so one time this girl was talking to me, my manager. She was like, man, I don't believe in God, but it just, you're the only person I know who talks about God the way I do. And the only thing I would ever do was just defend God when she would, you know, be like, I don't believe in him or whatnot. And you never know. When you stand up for your faith, when you're a good worker, when you show Christ through your actions, when you're not in gossip like everybody else on your job is, you are ministering in many different ways. So taking off the box of ministry and saying that it's not just about preaching, it's not just about teaching, it's about being faithful to wherever you are, wherever God has planted you. That is ministry. Amen.
Yeah,
All right, do we have anybody else who want to say anything about ministry and your calling, anything of that nature? Cool. All right, well, let's go on to our next question. I believe it'll be our final question. Think about what people have had to give up to follow Jesus, and why in the end will it always be worth it?
Well, just thinking about what people have given up, man. Like, you look at Stephen. That's one of the most powerful examples that I like to use in the Bible is when Stephen gave up his life, you know, and what he did was, you know, he was telling people, spreading the gospel and giving out that message, and it cost him his life. But what he saw in the end, you know, when he saw Jesus at the end, like, it was a powerful testimony. It was like right then and there, he saw the fruits of his labor. He saw exactly what it meant to die for Christ and die for the word. So there's a great reward in it. Like, that's a very motivating story. Like, there's something in the end of all this. We're not just doing this for no reason. It's not just doing this because it's something good or it's just something to do or it's a religion, it's something I was brought up in. Our relationship with God is something that we share with the world, and then there's something in return in it for us